Hello everybody, this is Calamity here, and this is take number 182,376. Today's video is going to be all about our favorite Kamisato sibling, depending on who you ask, Ayato. In this video, we're going to go everything you need to know, from his talents to his weapons, to artifacts, to constellations, and of course we're going to do a little bit of a Spiral Abyss showcase, and share my opinion on him since it has been quite some time since the character has been released. We have a lot to go over though, so let's get started. But before we do, quick shout out to Sammer, a friend of the channel, and she's letting me borrow her account. As you can see, I don't have all these wonderful 5-star characters. She is somewhat of a whale. She is nice enough to share her account to let me make guides for you for the characters that I can't personally afford to have on my own. Also, we're really close to 2,000 subs, so if you could hit that subscribe button and leave a like for the video for more content like this, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Let's move on with the guide. Mr. Ayato over here is a very easy to use Hydro main DPS. He's very similar to Yoimiya if you are familiar with her kit and playstyle. You kind of just press the attack button over and over and over again, pretty much. But let's quickly go over the talents. But before I do want to point out something that Sammer has done here with his talent levels. You might notice his normal attack talent being at level 9. Skill at 8 and burst at 6. Before we talk about his entire kit, it's kind of a mistake to invest in his normal attack talent because that is not where his damage comes from. It's actually from his skill and partially from his burst. So if you are investing into your Ayato, or when you're first building your Ayato, you definitely just want to invest in his skill and burst and get those to as high enough levels as you can. And then if you want to later do his normal attack talent. But speaking of normal attack talent, let's talk about it and why it's not really something you invest in. It's a standard normal attack talent. There is nothing fancy here, no fancy mechanics, no different changes. I guess his charge attack's a little bit different than other characters. He kind of does a mini dash forward, and then he does like a slash as his charge attack. Next up is the elemental skill. Now this is where the damage comes from, and it has quite a lengthy description. But all you really need to know is that when you tap his elemental skill, your normal attacks turn into very quick slashes. Genshin has this like really weird thing where they rename every little thing into a fancy phrase, so it kind of gets complex, but they turn into what's called Shun Suiken strikes. These strikes do more damage over time, like the more hits you do, the damage ramps up, as well as give Ayato what's called a Nami-sen stack. These are stacks that increase your damage based off your HP. Now hold your horses before you think Ayato's another HP scaling character like Farina or Neuvillette. He's actually not. It's more of a bonus. So you still want to build him like a normal DPS, but if you happen to get some HP percentage on your substats, on your artifacts, then hey, it's going to convert into a little bit more damage for you, but it's not something you have to heavily invest in. Also worth noting that Ayato gains resistance to interruption when you use his elemental skill. He also cannot do any charge or plunging attacks. And similar again to Yoimiya, if you leave the field at any time, because like let's say you mess up your rotation, you're like, I forgot to use someone else's burst before I used his skill, then it's automatically going to end his elemental skill state. So that's not good. Make sure you do your buffs and you get all your other characters set up before you use Ayato. So if you look at the skill attributes, you can see Shunsui can hit 1, 2, and 3. The damage goes up a little bit. It only lasts for 6 seconds. So keep that in mind. You want to do as much slashes as you can in those 6 seconds. And then there's the Nami-sen at level 8. We can see we're gaining 9.6% bonus damage. 9.6% of our max HP per stack as bonus damage. So you can have up to 4 stacks of this. Again, you don't have to heavily go on HP percentage to maximize this. He also summons a water illusion, I forgot to mention, when you do cast his skill. And if it touches an enemy or after the skill expires, the water illusion explodes. You can see it does some damage, and it also lasts for the same duration as the elemental skill. And something worth noting about Ayato's skill that I also forgot to mention is that these quick slashes that he's doing count as normal attack damage. So any buffs to normal attack damage specifically is also going to enhance these skill attacks here. Also, if you increase his attack speed, you will be able to increase the number of slashes he can do before the elemental skill expires. So you can pair him up with characters like Jin or Gene C2 if you have them available. Last but not least is his elemental burst, which is called Kamisato Art Suiyu. This is pretty easy to explain. It's basically rain. It's a large AoE that applies Hydro, but it also does a little bit of damage as well. And it also buffs normal attack damage of any characters within it, including himself. So you can buff his elemental skill damage with it as well. So we can see that the duration is 18 seconds, cooldown of 20, and an energy cost of 80. That is quite a hefty energy cost, but we can get some help with it thanks to one of his passive talents, and of course building a little bit of energy recharge on him and having some Hydro teammates on the team as well. So let's talk about his passive talents. Honestly, this one just translates into more damage. When you pop his skill, you're automatically going to get 2 of those Nami Sense stacks we were talking about, so you're already halfway to cap. And if your water illusion explodes, again, you can make it explode early by having it touch an enemy. You'll just straight up gain the maximum number of Nami Sense stacks, so you're going to be at Ayato's max damage potential much more earlier, depending on how you use this elemental skill. But no matter what, you're always going to get the 2 stacks initially, so you're already halfway there. Next up is Kamisato Art Michiyuku Hagetsu. This is gonna help you with your energy recharge needs, because when Ayato is not on the field and he has less than half of his energy bar filled, he will slowly gain 2 energy every second. This is actually really nice. It essentially cuts down on your energy cost of your burst by, depending on how long your rotations are, could help you save 10, 20, maybe even more energy when using his burst, so it's going to help alleviate some energy recharge needs. Last but not least, he has a cooking passive talent here where you have an 18% chance to make a suspicious dish when you cook perfectly. This is the bad version of any dish that you can make in Tevat, and you can give it to your friends in the teapot to get some interesting reactions to it if you so choose. Next up, let's talk weapons for Ayato, and he is a DPS, so honestly, when it comes to weapons, a lot of options are available for him. Now again, Samurai is a whale, so of course you can expect her to have the signature weapon for Ayato, and of course that is going to be his best weapon. It is designed for him, but that doesn't mean you're out of options. If you have pulled on any other sword DPS character's banner for their weapon specifically, you're in luck because they're all going to be great. So if you've pulled for Alhaitham's Light of Foliar Incision, great weapon there. Mistplittery Forge, great weapon. If you have a Primordial Jade Cutter, basically all of these 5-star weapons, Summit Shaper, Skyward, even Skyward Blade could be good. The Splendor of Shinkle Waters gives once crit damage. You're going to need a little bit of help to activate this weapon's effect, but you get the gist. 5-star weapons, any of the DPS ones, good options for Ayato. Now let's actually talk about realistic 4-star options if you're new. If you did Kazuha's story quest, you have access to the Ishin sword. This is a very basic sword. It doesn't even have refinements, but it's something that you can give to Ayato if you don't have a lot of 4-star options to work with. But if you do, and you can craft some good ones, you can craft some good weapons for Ayato, one of them being the Amanoma Kageuchi, I think that's how you say that. This is a fantastic sword for Ayato. You can craft it in Inazuma, just make sure this will make it so that you can use his burst all the time. It's going to give you a bunch of energy, so you don't have to focus. Actually, I want to say you don't have to focus at all on energy, but, obviously you want to get a little bit, but you can mainly focus on a lot of offensive stats, crit rate, crit damage if you're using this sword. It's a great option for him, and it's definitely free-to-play friendly. Now, if you did buy the Battle Pass for Genshin Impact, I might as well go ahead and point out that the Black Sword being one of the best 4-star options for him, but, obviously not free-to-play friendly. Finale of the Deep is another sword that you can craft in Fontaine. Now, as long as you can get rid of the Life Bond, basically what this sword does is apply a Life Bond when you use the skill. You basically just have to heal it off. Once you heal off the Bond of Life, you're going to get a huge attack boost to Ayato, and that's, of course, really good for a DPS. Another good option there. If Paimon is selling this, depending on when you're watching this video, she alternates between selling the Royal Weapon set and the Blackcliff set. If she is selling the Blackcliff Longsword, it's a pretty good option for Ayato as well. You can also give him a Lion's Roar. This is the, I would say, a little bit below average choice for him. it is going to be a little bit better if you're using Ayato in an Electro Charge team just to take advantage of the weapon effect, but yeah, it's not the best, but you know, it is something if you don't have too many options. But I've already mentioned 2 swords that you can already craft in the game, so you really shouldn't have to end up giving your Lion Sword to Ayato. Now let's say you're brand new and you're like, I don't have access to any of those regions you just mentioned. I don't have a lot of those 4-star options because I haven't pulled a lot. What is something I can give Ayato? Harbinger of Dawn. This is a great sword that gives you a bunch of crit damage and crit rate as long as your Ayato is above 90% HP, which is very easy to do if you have a shielder. Next up, we're going to talk about artifacts for Ayato. As you can see, Samer here has a TP Shimenawas and a TP Heart of Depth. Now you can do this if you want to. It's a lot better to go for a 4-piece set. Now there are 3 options you honestly can go for Ayato, and they're all going to be equally as good. It all depends on the subsets that roll, right? And that's the harder part. One of those sets being the Heart of Depth. The Heart of Depth is probably the easiest to understand because all you have to do is pop your skill, and you're straight up going to get a normal attack and charge attack damage increase of 30% for 15 seconds. That's really, really good. This one's a little bit more involved, but you should be able to still pull it off. The Nymph Dream basically gives you a bunch of attack percentage as well as Hydro damage bonus. As long as you're using normal attacks, elemental skills, and your bursts hit an opponent, you gain stacks of what's called a Mirrored Nymph, which gives you the increased damage here. And last but not least, the Gladiator's Finale. This is probably the easiest set to farm because it drops with every boss in Teyvat as well as weekly bosses. This one's going to give you a 35% increase in your normal attack damage if you're using a sword, which, hey, Ayato does use. So you get a straight up 35% damage boost, which is fantastic. Now, before I dive into what subsets you're looking for, I just want to give a quick mention to Echoes of an Offering. This is a terrible, terrible artifact set. One of the worst artifact sets in the game, and it kind of annoys me that it's used in the trial, in Ayato's trial to be specific, and it's really, really bad. Why is it bad? It's ping dependent. So if you have a bad internet connection, you're going to be losing out on a lot of damage. Also, it's RNG dependent. You have a 36% chance to trigger that value rate, and it goes up, but then you have to RNG and trigger it again and again and again. It's inconsistent. So you're going to have times where maybe this artifact set feels great and the value rate buff is going off and you're like, woo, look at the big numbers. But then other times you're going to be really unlucky and you're going to be like, hey, why does it feel so bad all of a sudden? So just skip on Echoes of an Offering and just pick one of the 3 sets I mentioned earlier. Those 3 sets are just consistent, right? They do the thing. They give you more damage, and it's great. Once you've settled on an artifact set, honestly, remember that all 3 of them are pretty close to each other in terms of power level. The subsets you're looking for are not any different than any other DPS, to be honest. You're looking for crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage. Remember to get a little bit of energy recharge. You might not have to invest in as heavily depending on the team that you're using him on. And if anyone has like Favonius weapons and stuff like that, well then, you don't really have to invest too hard. And his passive talent really helps with getting his burst all the time. But just make sure to get some. And then after that, Elemental Mastery, again, dependent on what team he's on. If you're using him in, like, let's say a Vaporized team, then some Elemental Mastery will help you out in damage. But if you're using him in something like a Freeze team, then you don't need any at all. Don't forget, you can also give him some HP percentage to increase his Namisen stack damage boost. And last but not least, if you're getting unlucky, the worst thing you can get is some flat attack and some flat HP to fill in those other stats. But definitely try to get some crit damage and crit rate and attack percentage on him. Now, when it comes to the Sands, Goblet, and Circlet, pretty easy stuff. We want just attack percentage on the Sands. Again, you really don't need energy recharge. That's too much of an investment at that point for the main stat. And HP percentage isn't going to give you as much damage as attack percentage overall, so better just to go with attack percentage. For the Goblet, Hydro damage bonus. It's pretty obvious there, right? And if you are early on into farming your artifacts, it's okay to use like an attack percentage goblet, at least until you get a hydro damage one. For the circlet, depending on what weapon you gave him and maybe how your substats rolled on your other artifact pieces, crit rate or crit damage, you know, use whichever one you're lacking. And that's pretty much it for his artifacts. Move on to Constellations. Now, honestly, his constellations are super easy to explain because they all essentially translate to the same thing, which is more damage. If you don't believe me, let's quickly go over them. C1. Increase your damage by 40% against opponents with less than 50% of their HP. More damage. C2. You have more Namisen stacks, up to 5 now, and when you have at least 3, you'll get a 50% boost to your max HP, which again we understand is more damage. C3, C5, more damage on skill and burst. Getting the +3 on your burst also means more normal attack damage increase from your burst. C4 straight up increases your attack speed by 15% for 15 seconds. That means more slashes in your duration. C6 is going to make you do 2 extra Shinsuken strikes every time you hit, and these deal 450% of Ayato's attack as damage. So you're basically hitting 3 times per slash. Big damage increase. So as you invest in your tier Ayato, those numbers are going to just get bigger and bigger and more numerous. So it's up to you. If you want to invest in him, feel free, but you shouldn't feel like you have to. And then in this case, you definitely don't. All right, let's talk team comps for Ayato, and Hydro being one of the most versatile, is that the right word? Versatile elements in the game. He can work with a lot of teammates. So one of them being Vaporize. This is something similar you probably saw in the trial, if you used them in the trial. Except they didn't have Kaza, they gave you Genshin instead, which is fine. It's just that you won't have, you know, Kaza obviously buffs a little bit more than Yunjin, and he helps with grouping. But I think this team is pretty self-explanatory, right? You got Bennett here for the heals and the attack buff. Zhongling is your pyro application. And because you have 2 pyros, you have pyro resonance for more attack boost. And Ayato's basically just going to vaporize off of Pyronado and should be big damage numbers, and Kaza here to swirl and to group up your enemies for you and provide his damage buff. Right, here's an example of a freeze team. Doesn't have to be this exact team. I just tried to pick a bunch of 4-stars so it looks at least a little free to play friendly, but you can use whoever cryo and hydro pliers you want. And honestly, you could also replace Jincho with another Animo character like Sucrose or Kazuha again. But basically, you should be freezing your enemies all the time. It's great for great groups of enemies, but not so good on bosses. Next up is Hyper Bloom or Burgeon teams. Ayato can slide nicely right into them, since he applies so much Hydro via his skill and burst. All you need to do is pair him up with either Kuki Shinobu or your Burgeon choice as well. If you use Dia or Toma, it doesn't really matter. It's all going to be the same. And you should be able to include Ayato's fantastic damage with the already amazing damage of Hyper Bloom or Burgeon, which should result in lots of numbers on the screen and things dying really quickly. Last but not least, this is more of a, I don't even think it's a meme, but this is more of a newer team, I guess. But we could also do a mono Hydro team with Ayato. Thanks to Farina. She is such an insanely good buffer for just literally anybody, and that includes Ayato. So you're going to have the Hydro Resonance buff here, so everyone's getting an HP increase, which, hey, for all of these characters, that literally means more damage for everybody. Well, for Kokomi, it means more heals. For Ayato, it also means more damage as well. So you can do something like this or any sort of variation with your choice of Hydro characters, and you're going to see a lot of blue numbers and big blue numbers. As long as you're fighting anything that isn't Hydro immune, I'm sure it's going to be an easy time. And lastly, as I mentioned before, Electro Charge teams are definitely a thing with Ayato. Feel free to use them. Again, water, just so many things you can do with it, and all of them are honestly good. Vaporize and Hyper Bloom Burgeon stuff are definitely going to be on the top shelf when it comes to which reactions are better. But again, just use whatever you want. Use what your account is limited to, and it's all going to be great. Now, we're going to try to wrap this video up, but I do have Spiral Abyss footage behind me. playing in the background, and I'm just going to talk about Ayato and share my thoughts on him. Since, again, it has been some time since his release, and a lot of things have changed in Genshin Impact since then. And honestly, he's still a very solid DPS. He might not be the meta or everyone's popular go-to Hydro DPS, but he still works. He can still clear the Spiral Abyss no problem. It also doesn't help that, you know, characters like Nuvolette and Farina just came out. So everyone kind of turns it into a bit like Andy from Toy Story, where it's like, you know, I don't want to play with you anymore. And, you know, they want to play the new characters and they want to see what's, you know, test the new characters out. Also, it doesn't help that Nuvolette is insanely strong. Just saying. He's literally the strongest Hydro DPS in the game. So, you know, a lot of people always will flock to whatever's the strongest. But again, that just because Nuvolette is the strongest doesn't make Ayato all of a sudden useless, right? He's still good and he can still be a very solid DPS, and you can invest into him as much as you want, and you know, those numbers are just going to go higher and higher. I think the thing that I like about Ayato compared to other Hydro characters though is that his simplicity. If you're on mobile, if you're on, I guess, console as well, you know, there is no combo to memorize here. There is no animation canceling. There is no fancy tech that you need to learn to help optimize your damage. It's literally use his burst, use his skill, tap attack. That is his whole rotation. Or, you know, mash the left click, mash the attack button, whatever it is for you on your controller of choice. Just mash it. And that's it. You know, depending on what team it is, obviously set up your other characters' bursts and stuff for him to do elemental reactions off of or whatever, and then that's pretty much his game plan. Ayato can also be used in other teams where he can just primarily be a Hydro applier because of his burst, applying lots and lots of Hydro. So if you just want to work off of that, that's fine, because she'll get a normal attack boost from his burst and be able to vaporize off of his burst as well. But yeah, just in case I didn't mention this again, don't forget you can also increase his attack speed to increase the amount of slashes he can do per usage of his skill. So you pair him up with Jin at C6 or Jean or Mika, he's going to get a significant damage increase because he's able just to mash those slashes more often. Well, I don't think this video needs to go on too long. I think that's just going to be a wrap for Ayato. Again, just a very solid character overall, and they'll be able to carry you from early game all the way up to Spiral Abyss floor 12 if needed, or if you want to. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and or subscribe to the channel. Again, I'm really close to 2,000 subs. Also, if I forgot to mention anything or I didn't explain stuff well enough, because I did kind of go through those talents kind of fast, I've been trying to shorten my videos a bit. Please let me know in the comments, or please feel free to ask in the comments. I'll do my best to try to answer you. And yeah, with that being said, I'll see y'all in the next video. Thanks again for watching. See ya.